Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into something truly fascinating. We're going to examine Surah 28 of the Quran, also known as Al-Qasas. But listen, we aren't going to look at it the way it's traditionally taught. Instead, we're going to let the text's own internal vocabulary systematically reveal its objective laws of reality.
So let's just jump right in. Often, when people read ancient texts, especially the story of Musa and Fir'aun, or Moses and Pharaoh, they kind of just view it as a suspenseful historical story, right? A classic tale of good versus evil. But what if it's not just ancient history? What if it's actually a structural blueprint of reality itself? Today, we're shifting the paradigm. We're going to see how this source material constructs universal principles about power, wealth, and human psychology.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start by letting the text speak for itself, then analyze Fir'aun's illusion of power, look at the messenger's true role, break down Qarun's myth of self-sufficiency, and wrap it all up with the concept of the enduring home. Let's get started.
All right, Section 1, letting the text speak.
To really grasp this blueprint, we have to use a method called tasrif. Basically, this means allowing the text to interpret itself by tracking its own vocabulary and structural patterns across the verses. We're stepping back and letting the source material give a direct voice to the Quran, bypassing all those external assumptions. This completely shifts the framework. The traditional narrative often frames these verses as just past historical miracles, mostly meant to show the supremacy of an institutional religion, where guidance is basically a list of compliance rules. But when we look at the actual structural reality of the text, it actively replaces those narratives. It actually becomes this deep structural study of how artificial hierarchies inevitably collapse under the laws of reality. It goes from being a mere historical chronicle to giving us actionable principles of alignment.
And this framework perfectly maps out the entire architecture of the surah. The text tracks a single thematic axis across three completely distinct domains. You have the political power of Musa and Fir'aun, the divine mission of the messenger, and the economic wealth of Qarun. But here's the kicker. All three of these separate arcs converge on one massive, unavoidable question. Who does your power, wealth, and security actually belong to? Across all these different registers of life, the text is asking, what do you actually do with what you've been given?
Moving right along to Section 2, Fir'aun and the illusion of power.
Let's start with that first arc. We're looking at how the text constructs the tension between massive systemic tyranny and the subtle agency of divine intent. Early on, the text describes Pharaoh's operational playbook. He exalts himself high in the land and fractures the people into divisive factions to maintain his control. But then, the text drops this absolutely crucial word, istudaful. It's the passive form of being rendered weak. The text is modeling a structural law here. These people were not inherently weak. They were deliberately and systematically stripped of their agency by an oppressive external structure. And the Quran states its clear intent is to orient directly toward those who are weakened, to make them the ultimate inheritors. This isn't just some plot twist in a story. It's a programmatic law stated right out of the gate. Artificial hierarchies create unstable imbalances, and reality inherently works to recalibrate them. So that begs the question. How does reality actually counter Pharaoh's loud, massive, highly visible system of tyranny? You'd probably expect a massive, loud intervention to fight it, right? Well, the reality is completely paradoxical. The counter-movement is this incredibly subtle, quiet instruction given directly to a mother's consciousness. Cast him into the river and do not fear and do not grieve. Think about how wild that is. To place her own infant into a river is literally the exact thing she's trying to prevent. But this right here, this is the ultimate picture of surrendering to reality. It's doing something that makes absolutely zero logical sense in order to stay aligned with what is structurally true. She is assured against fear for the future and grief for the past. The ultimate subversion of Pharaoh's massive system happens quietly, proving that human structures relying on surveillance and division are completely blind to the intrinsic movements of reality. Now fast forward a bit. As Musa grows, we see his education in the gap. He accidentally kills a man, and what does he do? He immediately owns it. No rationalizations, no excuses. He names his error and seeks accountability. Later, he performs a totally selfless act of care for two women at a well, asking for absolutely nothing in return. And it's then that he names his own state using the word fakir. Now, this is usually just translated as poor, but the text uses it here to mean a genuine dependence and an orientation toward reality. He acknowledges his total need without trying to claim his good actions as his own personal possession. Which brings us to Section 3, the messenger, delivering, not forcing. So we enter the second structural arc. Remember, Musa hesitated when he was first given his mission, pointing out his lack of eloquence. The text modeled there that true strength comes from alignment, not from individual perfection. But here the text addresses the messenger directly regarding his own internal grief. Indeed, you do not guide whoever you love. That word love is just so deeply significant here. The text is acknowledging a very real, very heavy emotional reality. A messenger's job is literally just to deliver the message. It's not to force outcomes, not even on the people they care about most. Guidance is not something you can just force inside another person.
And let's look at how this builds into a much broader structural choice. The text basically categorizes all human systems into two distinct tracks. On one side, you have Huda. These are objective, actionable principles of alignment that protect consciousness. On the flip side, you have Hawa. These are transient, subjective human projections, our fears, our shifting illusions. The text essentially forces a choice. Are you consciously tracking reality, or are you just reacting to shifting illusions and survival anxieties? Let's look at the third arc in Section 4, Qarun and the myth of self-sufficiency. We're shifting now from political power to economic illusion. And this is embodied perfectly by the archetype of Qarun. The guy was unbelievably wealthy, sitting on massive treasures, but his mindset? Entirely self-absorbed. When he's warned about it, he makes this devastating claim. I was only given it on account of knowledge that is in me. This is huge. The text uses this specific claim to expose the precise inner movement that leads to systemic collapse. It's not just the fact that he had wealth, it's the attribution of that wealth entirely to himself. It's that dangerous delusion that you are the standalone cause of your own success. And this leads to a truly beautiful structural symmetry in the text. Qarun's material anchors completely fail him, and the text explicitly states that he and his home are swallowed by the earth. Just think about the symmetry there for a second. Fir'aun claimed political superiority and was swallowed by the very sea he thought he commanded. Qarun claimed economic self-sufficiency and was swallowed by the literal earth and estate he thought he owned. Both of these archetypes of false self-sufficiency are literally destroyed by the exact foundations they believed they controlled. It's mind-blowing. Finally, bringing it all together with Section 5, the enduring home. This is where the three structural arcs we've been tracking converge. This single verse recapitulates the entire blueprint of the surah. That is the home of the hereafter. We make it for those who do not want elevation in the land and not corruption. It's the grand finale. It proves that the enduring state of peace and stability, the true home, is naturally inherited by the people who actively reject Fir'aun's desire for artificial elevation and Qarun's systemic corruption. So let's do a quick recap of the core reality we've seen demonstrated across these different registers. Fir'aun sought elevation and divided people, he was swallowed. Musa's mother was given a paradoxical instruction to surrender. She did, and her child safely returned. Musa accepted his own limitations and named his dependence. He was given strength. Qarun claimed absolute self-sufficiency. He was swallowed. It's one universal, objective principle demonstrated over and over again across power, family, mission, and wealth. Which leaves us with the ultimate question, and I want to turn this core theme directly back to you. When you look at your own life, your own systems, your own perceived self-sufficiency, who does your power, wealth, and security truly belong to? Are you claiming it entirely as your own doing, like Qarun, or are you surrendering it to the reality of the blueprint? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating structural architecture with me today. Keep tracking reality, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.